Okay, great. Well, everybody, thank you very much for joining this virtual happy hour. I'm really excited about this because the area of social media is something that I feel like is often talked about at events and seminars, and it's put in the context, at least in the ones that I'm aware of, more often than not, like how do you grow your followers? How do you get more people to like your posts or just ratchet up those numbers? And I think at the core of that discussion is ultimately what I am excited to hear from Mandy and Doug about, in terms of what content you're creating, the uniqueness of that, and the voice that you bring and that you share with other people. So we have two very talented folks. This introduction does not do them justice. Mandy, who is advanced Cicerone, freelance writer, award-winning home brewer. You might have spotted her on her popular Instagram and Twitter accounts. Doug, who is CFO at Revolution Brewing in Chicago, also a two-time winner in our NAGBW award competition. Both are prolific in social media. Doug, we're going to talk about TikTok, but Mandy, I'd love to start with you, and then we'll kick it over to Doug, because I want to start with a question that I hope will kind of guide where we're going to go. Why are you on social media?
Well, for a long time, I was a social media manager. So that's it. It used to be business for a really long time, out of journalism school. And then as far as beer focused social media, I really got into it between my certified Cicerone and my advanced Cicerone exams. I had like all of this new knowledge I was so excited about, and people that I was close to didn't want to hear me talk about it all the time. A lot of people didn't really care about the SRMs of different beers and things like that. So I just started putting it out there to find a community. And I was lucky to find that. So that's why I hang around.
Doug, what was it for you in terms of why you end up spending your time amongst everything else? You're spending it on these platforms. Doug, we're not getting your audio. You are not on mute, but we're not getting your audio.
Sorry, how about now?
Oh,
Good? All right, sorry everyone. Glad that was easy. Okay. So it started for me in 2013. I worked for Reyes Holdings, which is, the parent company of the largest beer distributor in the country. But I was not in a beer specific role. I was in a corporate finance role in this family office. And I had worked there for, by that point, 5 years, and wanted so badly fell in love with beer. That's as the scene was developing and starting to get big in Chicago. And I wanted to work in beer, and I was kind of already in the perfect place where I wanted to get kind of transferred over to one of their beer companies. And I was struggling to figure out the right way to do it. Like I couldn't find a way in. So I actually created a Instagram account. That was right when Instagram started getting big. It was probably like maybe late 2012. So it's pretty, early-ish on getting into Instagram, and especially to make like a beer dedicated account. So I made this account to try to kind of demonstrate my knowledge and also kind of build my own knowledge as well by finding as many, like-minded people as I could and follow as many breweries I could, and just reading everything that was out there on that medium, and just kind of went all in with it. And then so that was kind of the beginning of it. For me, I was like kind of out to prove something while also kind of developing my own knowledge.
So the both of you kind of hit on this common denominator of wanting to share your knowledge, which came from a passion. And then obviously you both have been successful in terms of building audiences and people to engage with in friendships, I imagine, as well. So I don't want to get as far as where that kind of awkward question was that I mentioned, like how do you get followers? But the other side of that coin, which is as you were going from this place of I want to find an outlet where I can share my interest and passion and hopefully find like-minded people. How do you go from there to where you are? Is it content or strategy in terms of trying to find what takes you from A to B? And Mandy, if you want to jump in first.
Sure. I don't know when I heard this. I think it was like 2016, probably. Malcolm Gladwell did a podcast episode with someone talking about how he thinks about writing. And he has this concept of like giving the reader candy, which is just like a quick, memorable fact that they can go share at a party. And I've always loved that concept ever since I've heard it. I think it's just the perfect way to communicate with someone. People can't really, we love writing these really long form things with all this interesting information, but people are always going to grab like 2 pieces of candy and take them with them in their life. So I kind of have always had that strategy on mind, just like, hopefully they can take one fact out of every Instagram caption. Like, I think the last one I did was about cheese, and I hope next time that they're at the store, they remember those like 2 facts that I said, and that can actually change their life. And I think I've noticed like a lot of people save my posts and things like that. Oh God. Yeah. And unfortunately the ones that I'm not in don't get as great of an engagement. Instagram loves a face. But yeah, so there's like that little fact that says I always have at least 1 soft cheese, hard cheese, blue cheese. And so hopefully the next time they're staring at the cheese case, they have that little piece of candy in their head. And it seems to have worked. I see like a lot of things get saved, and a lot of people tag me in their stories when they use little tips that I gave in the caption. So that's kind of my strategy. And I think it's in a world where a lot of people are either reviewing beer or posting about places that they go, it's kind of a different type of content. So
yeah, this is one of the reasons why I find kind of the way that you interact on these platforms really interesting, because you kind of drop in these little nuggets in such a casual, easy fashion that sometimes I don't know if I realize I'm getting educated in the process of just kind of being interested in engaging with it, just with reading and looking at things too. When you talk about this little piece of candy, so like you're talking about the cheese thing, like that could be one. Is there something that you keep in mind when you're thinking about a particular picture or an educational piece of information about, maybe it's that SRM that no one wants to hear about, but somebody does? How do you go about thinking about, in a proactive way, what that candy is?
I think, especially for me, I try to stay away. I feel like a lot of people know things about maybe stouts and IPAs. So I'm always kind of gearing what I talk about towards more classic styles, or styles that I really like that I hope are up and coming, like Belgian styles and Saisons and more classic German styles. So I just kind of, try to look at what's not out there that I'm not seeing a lot of. And I try to definitely not like a content creator that changes what I do in my life. I kind of am just existing. When I drink an Oxbow Pale Ale, I'm like, oh, what's interesting about this? And then kind of just take a note and snap a picture. More than I'm like, let's go somewhere specific to capture content and really think about it. It's more just what's coming up in my life. So.
Yeah, I'm going to share another photo. So this was the second to last one that you have on your Instagram too. And I think this is maybe talking about what you were just mentioning with something like a Belgian style. And so people, if you haven't followed Mandy, you can, Beers with Mandy is her handle, you can see here. But this is like when I was talking about what I appreciate is that, like so many other, you may see that like, oh, you're mentioning the beer and here's what it is. But then all of a sudden it very quickly turns into, it's not in a preachy way. You're very casually mentioning these aspects of it that matter. If this is acting as the candy in this post, what is it that you were thinking about that helped make this something unique to what you like to try to do?
Yeah, so this one, a lot of people, when I say, oh, it has tons of vanilla, people comment, oh, does Duvel add vanilla to it? And so I kind of got ahead of that. I think people don't always realize vanilla notes come from a phenol, and a lot of people think of phenols as yeast character if they are studying beer. So I think that's kind of just an interesting thing, and a couple people can read that and be like, oh, the vanilla is actually a real substance extracted from wood in the barrels, and that's why things taste like vanilla. There was actually a good question on this one too about why beer that goes into barrels gets a higher ABV, and I was like, oh, that's it. I took a note, and I was like, a future post that I will do about kind of extracting the extra alcohol that's still in the barrel when the beer goes in. So that's kind of another way. It's just if people ask questions, things that might be obvious to me aren't obvious to people who aren't thinking about beer all the time. So,
Doug, so that when we think about what Mandy's talking about with this idea of candy that's very clearly kind of sprinkled in with these nuggets of information, I want to talk for a second about your Instagram, because to me, I can't remember how long I've been following your account, but it's long enough to know. I think I started following it because you were doing these really great Photoshop versions of images, beer related, and then there's a whole host of other things mixed in. But let's stick with this analogy, if that's okay with you, to talk about like this idea of this little nugget of something special. How is it that you try to approach what you're doing? Say, like, if it happens to be you disco dancing.
Silent disco dancing.
How is it that you like to try to approach these things, that it's not just doing something like silent disco, but you're trying to build on something that you've created unique to yourself?
Yeah, so I love the candy reference. I watched Malcolm Gladwell's masterclass over the summer, and I heard that there and related to it immediately. For me, it's changed. I mentioned how I spent 3 years grinding away at things like this Instagram account to try to get into the industry, and then once I did, as this kind of beer geek who's absorbing all the content he can find, who's has this platform and now kind of has access to experiences of what it's like to be behind the scenes at a brewery and be in discussions on packaging formats and label design and all the kind of tricks of the trade that go into that. My candy used to be, because I was a beer geek and trying to build something, it would be like if a new beer came out, I'd try to run and get it that first day it was out, so that the candy could be like a quick early review, because other people might have seen it out there and want to know some quick feedback on how was it, what's it taste like. That has evolved significantly to like how I approach it now as somebody who works at a brewery that's big in Chicago. And so it's, I try to focus more on like all the information I wish I had known back then. And so the candy becomes like, what can I share with all these people following me, have hops in their screen name and IPA in their screen name. These are all beer fans that are following me. And, I feel like the industry has matured to the point that, beer fans are ready to go more inside baseball. And there's like a craving for, more beyond that, what they've had access to in the past. So that's something I feel like I've been in a position to offer up. And I think everybody out there has their own version of this. But for me, it's like kind of what happens behind the scenes at a brewery and that. So whenever I have the opportunity to share those things, I get a lot of, like, thanks. I hadn't never thought about it that way. I didn't realize that went into that. So that's one of the things I do. I try to mix it up and do a little bit of everything, but that's one that's been successful for me.
I want to repeat something back to the both of you to make sure that I'm maybe making these connections the way that you're both talking about them. Is that the way and perhaps the reason why you came to these platforms was to try to find community, perhaps like-minded people who had the same kind of geeky passion that you did. But as you've kind of gone through, to me, it sounds like there's almost a circle where you've found those people, maybe both in terms of on these platforms, but certainly outside as well. You've proven your chops. And now you're both talking about these aspects of connecting with people back in basic ways. You're talking about beer in terms of its experiential value of basic flavors. You're talking about it in terms of finding, it's not racing to get a review online as fast as possible, so much as maybe thinking about it in a more holistic, like palatable way to more people. So maybe Doug, we'll stick with you for a moment, but in this journey, I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is finding this balance of, if I'm trying to create a niche for myself, like how do I find that? So it sounds like you may have, but you're coming back to this space where it's back to the simplicity of talking about it in an educational way and not just ratcheting it up more and more to get more photos, more dancing to silent discos, things like that.
Oh man. Yeah, so I definitely think I take way more than it started with me searching for education, and now I feel like I'm in a better position just because I've grown up, in that time, and now I feel like I'm in a better position to offer education, both of which have advantages to me and the person who's it's kind of like a trade. And I always try to remind myself, I think I've written this a few times, but I try to make sure I'm giving more than I'm taking, giving a lot more than I'm taking, being forthcoming. And that's one way to differentiate yourself. I think some of the most successful things I've ever done on there have been spontaneous, and the things that I think about too long and overthink are the things that kind of fail or don't really go anywhere. But it's the kind of honesty, forthcomingness, and really being willing to put yourself out there, do something that nobody else is doing or thinking about quite like you are. That's what you have to do on a mature platform like Instagram. That's, I use the term baked a lot for Instagram. In the beer world, being baked would be like if a brewery's on every store shelf already and there's nowhere else to get your beer. It's just a matter of selling. You're baked. With Instagram's got an audience that's kind of there, and it's not going anywhere. People have built their following, and now it's a lot harder to get followers because it's in this mature state. So you really either have to stand out, you have to be more patient than ever if you want to build a following. But the key is to just kind of put yourself out there, be honest, and try to put your own unique spin on whatever it is you're passionate about.
Doug, I want you to think about video for a moment. We're going to switch back to Mandy because
Yep.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on how what you just talked about relates to video content. Mandy, for someone who brews, writes, thinks about beer in an active way, when you're on these platforms, what is it that catches your eye that other people are doing?
Good question. I honestly, like, if you look at who I follow, a lot of what I follow is restaurants and people who are outside of the beer space, but still in hospitality or other kinds of food like cheese. I've really gotten into honey recently, just because I like to see the way that they talk about their mediums. I think sometimes we can get into a bit of an echo chamber where we're seeing everyone talk about beer. We're kind of echoing back to each other, either the way that they communicate or the way that we think about things. And so kind of getting outside and seeing some other mediums and how I can relate that back to beer is more what I'm like looking for, more what catches my eye than things necessarily in beer. I think if I look at too much other beer stuff, I'll just start to sound like everyone else. So
yeah, I think one of the reoccurring things that I heard a lot, but even more so in the last 9 months from people in the industry, is that if you don't pay attention to areas of beverage, not just beverage alcohol, beverage outside of beer, you're going to miss what's either happening now or soon to happen in beverage alcohol. And there seems to be, like you're talking about, looking elsewhere in the food and beverage space. Are there, when you see some of those accounts, when you're talking about restaurants, places outside of beer, what is it that you find most interesting? What is it that they're doing that brings you back?
Actually, I'll say during the pandemic, what I found really interesting is people who have a platform who've figured out how to give back or affect their community that's not on the internet. I follow a blogger who's in Austin, and there was a restaurant that was about to fail. And so instead of letting them close, she went in and like popped up as her brand and basically took it over and like did a little pop-up and all these people came and they were able to stay open. There's other bloggers who are, creating restaurant guides to help people stay supported, or, everyone's putting out these great lists of how to support your local brewery. So I think more and more that's what's catching my eyes, how you can use Instagram to either relate to the real world or relate elsewhere on the internet, not just like keeping people scrolling.
One of the things that I really appreciate about what you do existing in two spheres with Instagram and Twitter is that there's not a lot of overlap. And I don't know if my intuition was correct or not, but I saw what was happening on your Instagram as kind of this education piece. And then on Twitter happened to, like, there was a little bit of behind the scenes almost. So like if you were looking at both of them, you get a complete picture. You're not losing anything one place or the other. But if you are following you on both, if I'm following you on both platforms, they work together. Is that something that you consciously think about, or am I just plucking it? Yeah.
No, I think when you say behind the scenes, I know people who I talk to on Twitter and follow me on Twitter are much more like beer focused generally. I actually have a lot of followers who are just interested in food and other kinds of alcohol. So I think I can put the education there. Whereas I feel like the people who follow me on Twitter aren't looking to learn that vanillin is a phenol necessarily. So yeah, I kind of am conscious of that audience, and I don't really have a huge following on Twitter. So I just do it more to connect with people like you guys and have kind of industry conversations and things like that.
Doug, before we get to video, I think something that Mandy said maybe happens to connect nicely with philanthropic efforts that you've put together. So I'm gonna share a screen right here real quick, and please fill in some background, because you've done, speaking of which, of using your platform to do good for other people, and I know that you've gotten good and rightful attention. You've done fundraisers for a local hospital there. Would you mind just giving a little bit of background about how that came to be?
Yeah, so this started off with, so my real quick, my son had a lung surgery. He had part of his lung removed when he was 7 months old. He's a normal, healthy kid now, 5 years old. So after that happened, I had always wanted to do something for this, for our children's hospital in Chicago, just as a thank you. And the main place I had to turn was this Instagram account that had, a nice following that I felt like I could, and it's certainly not all Chicago, but I definitely have a heavy Chicago focus with, posting so much of local beer on it. So we caught wind of this fundraising opportunity where they wanted to take all the MRI rooms at the hospital. They're renovating them and wanted to turn the room into a more child-friendly place where a child might be more likely to be able to lay still on those beds for the hour and a half that it can take. So we wanted to kind of paint the walls, put decals on the floor, and the hardest part being wrapping the machines with these custom decals. So it started off with me, offering to take on one of these rooms, which was a $10,000 fundraiser. So I put it out there that I would be willing to do a photo shoot for any brewery, or do like an animation of their cans, which is something I do for fun every once in a while when I can find the time. And ended up just getting tons of support from people. And then a bar reached out and asked if I wanted to team up with the bar and do a fundraiser to add a second room. And before you knew it, we did all four of them and raised the whole $40,000. And then another project came up a year later, much more recently, this past fall, where we did a CT scan room and their nuclear medicine room, and we ended up raising another $30,000. But just use the Instagram following to either do raffles, silent auctions. Breweries offered up experiences where, like, one of them was you got to collab with the brewery and choose, work with them on a name, the label art, and the recipe. And that one alone raised someone bid $2,000 to be able to collab with this newer Saison brewery in Chicago called Is Was. And that just kind of, so we had, like, low buy-in ways to help out, and then these big ticket items, and I just used the following to promote it, and the response was incredible. And the amount of people learned who went through similar experiences at that hospital who were extra supportive because they were, and the amount of messages I got from people willing to open up and like mostly like thanking me for being willing to talk about the experience we had with our kids. You know, there's people that I now talk to regularly. Some work at breweries, some are just beer fans whose kids went through, in many cases, scenarios way more difficult than what we went through. So I have this like new network of beer fans who cross over with experiences at this hospital, which is just kind of like another example of those unexpected benefits that can come out of putting this effort into building a social media following. It gives you the power to do things like raise this kind of money, but then also you meet these what could become lifelong friends who have this kind of shared connection beyond just beer.
Yeah, I remember it's like circa 2018, there was this, maybe it was Beyond Beer on Instagram, but there was this barrage of posts where it's beer raffle, tag 5 people in the comments and you'll get entered to a raffle for the Pliny the Younger or something like that. Which I don't know if just because I've stopped paying attention, but they've certainly tapered off. So like that was a way to kind of game the system. Like, I do good? I'm not entirely sure. But I want to try to connect maybe what Mandy was talking about and what you're talking about here for, you know, for a lot of people who are listening, maybe not have the same kind of personal connection to things that you did. But broadly speaking, I'm wondering, when you think about trying to use a platform in a smart way to benefit a particular cause, was there like 1 or 2 key takeaways that you felt going through this process more than once now, with this raffle and trying to raise awareness of something else? Like, what would work beyond that for maybe if it's somebody on this call who just feels passionate and connected to a cause and maybe wants to smartly use their platform in a way to raise awareness?
You know, what worked the best for me, what always got the biggest interaction and people tagging their friends who they knew had, you know, an experience similar, was just kind of like going to that level that some people are uncomfortable going, like getting out of your comfort zone and talking about the details of, you know, in the situation, you know, scary time for our family, and being willing to talk about that openly. Not everybody's willing to do that, and not everybody needs to be, but the benefits that can come from that are, you know, worth considering and worth understanding. And that's, I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking about, but that's what kind of jumped out first, was just like, the more I left my comfort zone and said something that I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to like be this honest out there, the bigger the outpouring of support. And you don't need to have a huge following to do this. It doesn't have to be, you know, like that. All it takes is a couple people to see that, and then they'll, you know, tag their friend who they know went through something similar, and then all of a sudden you've got this new connection, and all it takes is one, really.
So we've got about 8 minutes left, and I want to have a chunk of that for questions should anybody have it. So I'm going to do a hard pivot, Doug. Can you talk to us about TikTok?
Yeah.
Give us a couple minutes about how and why you saw this as a platform you wanted to play on.
I saw how young the audience was, and I'm not talking about under 21 young. I'm talking like the demographic that craft beer is kind of missing right now, which is like the 21 to 29 crowd. And I know there's kids on this too, but you know, that's really where it is. And this is just where all the growth is. Like, people can come onto TikTok, do something unique, and it doesn't have to be a dance, it doesn't have to be comedy, but just do something interesting, show off their passion. It's an open canvas. You can do whatever you want with this thing, just like you can with Instagram. People think it's just for 1 or 2 things. It's for anything, just like all the other platforms. But this is, they're really pushing content. They, like, when you put something out there, they like sample it to a bunch of random people who they, you know, from keywords think might have a chance of being interested. And then if people start liking or commenting that, they know that this is a good piece of content, and then they just push it and push it and push it. And this is, you can't do this on Instagram or Facebook and go from one post with 0 followers to 10,000 in a day. And it happens to tons of people. It hasn't happened to me. I've kind of used it to just have a little fun with it and figure out how to use the video editing on it. When you're in your late 30s, or beyond, it's a little, it's just different. It's not something anyone can't figure out. But there's open running room for organic growth, or finding people organically, whereas Instagram and Facebook are always going to limit how many people see anything you post. If you've got like a page for your writing or anything else you're doing beer related, they're going to limit it because they're going to want to sell you an ad, because again, they're in that mature state where they need to make money off it. TikTok's in the stage where they just want good content. They figure out what is a good piece of content and they push the heck out of it. So it's similar with LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn is a place where everybody's on LinkedIn, but the amount of good content on it is kind of lacking. So when something picks up traction, LinkedIn is a place where you could post something and all of a sudden it could have 300,000 likes and comments on it because it just happens to be something that took off. It's a little bit, you got to win the lottery for that to happen. But like those are the two places where you can actually like kind of hit the jackpot and connect with a bunch of people. It used to be that way on the others, but it's not anymore.
Thank you very much for saying LinkedIn is a place for content and not where my college-aged resume just languishes in wait. We've got 5 minutes. I do want to open it up to questions. I've got plenty to last that time, but if you have a question, please do feel free to unmute yourself and chime in and ask Doug or Mandy what you might have on your mind.
Can I go? Is it okay? How's it going, guys? I was wondering, you guys, Mandy especially, I didn't realize how long and well written your posts are. How do you edit and compose? I feel like when I'm trying to do something like that on my iPhone, I lose train of thought, my notifications blow up, and I lose track of what I'm doing. Do you use something else to do it? Do you transfer them over? Like, what's your strategy?
That's funny. Honestly, I make myself get on my workout bike and type. I'm only allowed to be on Instagram when I'm on the workout bike, and I just type the caption with my thumbs and then read it again to prove typos. So that's the rule during quarantine. So no. But I mean, if you want to do something where you're planning stuff out professionally, I use Later for a couple clients. So if that's something you're looking to really map things out.
I also use Later and love it. I take most of my photos on the weekends when it's actually, especially this time of year, which is the only time to get some good light. So I take a lot of my pictures on weekends, and it's not so much that I'm planning them out and like, ooh, I got to have content for every day. It's more that I haven't thought through what I want to say about that picture. So Later lets me do it on a keyboard. So I type all my captions at a computer, and then just a lot of times I'm scheduling it for like a minute after I finish it. But I just want to do it on a computer because I'm the same way. I struggle with, like, if I write 3 paragraphs, which I sometimes do, sometimes don't, on an Instagram post, but it helps me to write like 3 in a row and just be like, oh, this will be Monday night, this will be Tuesday night, this will be Wednesday night, and then just bing, bing, bing.
Mandy, how do you handle your photography of you?
I have my wonderful husband. Who's
okay, they're not selfies, so I'm just saying, you have some really nice photography. Your beer photography is great, but I know, like, you're at a lot of bars and places. I'm like, my friends don't take good photos like that. So your husband is your photographer? Is that the key?
I would say 30%. I also, like, when I'm out, more during the pandemic, for him. But when I'm out with friends and stuff, I usually kind of force them. I actually just got this phone case that has a kickstand on it, but the kickstand leans really weird, so that hasn't worked out the way I thought it would. But occasionally it is literally, I have this like little travel tripod, so.
You just selfie, you just time it out, or you?
No, I'll just, yeah, you can just put it on. I have like the watch, that's the trigger from the phone.
Oh, okay.
On a little tripod, so.
And how many takes do you do in your photos?
As few as I can, because I'm always really embarrassed. So I think I give myself 30 seconds and I just press the trigger like a bunch of times, and then it's like, I think you can see in that doable picture, it's not perfect, but like I said, it's really just my real life, like what I'm doing in real life, that I think
Right.
is interesting and relate to people. So yeah. My Doug's photos are beautiful. I'm not there yet. Working on it.
Yeah, both Doug and Mandy, I'm curious, just for those of us who might like one person band this pretty much. So it's like you're saying, so we're talking about the photos, Doug, you're talking about the editing. How much time do you spend, the both of you, in terms of, you know, bringing one, say, thought out post from start to finish?
I usually get like 20 minutes on the bike. I don't know. No, I just keep it in my camera roll and try to kind of think. I don't have like a huge content calendar. I probably should. I try to remember like national days. There was like Learn to Homebrew Day, and I actually worked with More Beer on a post. So that was kind of a more thought out, longer process. But I try to keep it. I think when I think too hard, it's kind of what Doug was saying. When I think too hard, it becomes like this more formal thing. And I think the reason people are comfortable reading what I write is because it's pretty casual.
We've got like 60-ish seconds left. So if you're in the chat, everybody, and you scroll all the way up, Samer, thank you very much. Posted a link to the Google chat. I'm gonna pause. We're gonna tease Doug answer to that question so Doug can tell us how much time he spends editing his disco dancing videos and DJing videos on TikTok. So I'm gonna end the recording and then we'll hop over.
See you over